One of the things that I'm quite worried about after Election Day is that since it may take additional time for the votes to get counted this year, especially with mail-in voting, there's a greater chance of civil unrest and violence after the election. Some people expect there to be an answer to who won the election on election night. I don't think we're necessarily going to get that. And I think it's important that we start preparing people now, that there's nothing illegitimate about taking a few extra days or even weeks in order to make sure that all the votes get counted. In fact, it would be illegitimate if we didn't make sure that all of the ballot votes were counted.
So what will you do, say, on election night if one candidate says, I won, when all the votes aren't in?
We're putting in place a policy. We have a partnership with Reuters, and if someone tries to prematurely declare victory, whether it's in a presidential election or any of the others, before there's a consensus on who won that election, then we're going to add some context and a label to that post saying there isn't an official result on this election, and directing people to the voting information center where we'll have the list of all the official results that have come in.
Do you have any concerns about campaign ads on your platform? Are you thinking about readjusting your strategy about that?
Yeah, so thanks for asking about this. So one of the new policies that we're announcing is we're going to block new political and issue ads in the last week of the campaign. And I generally believe that the best antidote to bad speech is more speech. But when there's a vote, then if someone is kind of dumping some new information, if it's misinformation in the last days of the election, then there may not be time for that normal kind of debate and process to play out. And that's why I think it's important to have extra restrictions in the last week.
You and I have had the conversation before about misinformation and political ads. There does seem to be a bit of a contradiction there, that you won't challenge incorrect political ads, but you will challenge misinformation from candidates.
The thing that I'm very sensitive is having us be the ultimate deciders of what is right and wrong and true and false in the world. There are a number of cases where we can rely on other authorities. Around elections, we partner with local election officials. So if someone is saying, hey, don't go to this polling place because the lines are really long, and the local election official says, no, that's false, it's fine here, then we'll take that down. That's voter suppression, and we'll take that down no matter who says it.
This week we learned that the FBI tipped off Facebook to Russian interference on your platform. What did they point out to you that you didn't know?
Well, over the last few years, we've put a lot of effort into building partnerships with the intelligence community and election commissions around the world, as well as the other tech companies. So part of the normal security apparatus now is that we share intelligence and tips with each other. And between the partnerships that we have in place with governments and other tech companies, we were able to find and disrupt this relatively early.
You're talking about what you're doing on your platform to safeguard this election, but this is also a personal cause for you and your wife, Priscilla. You both announced that you were donating $300 million to do what exactly?
There have been these recent debates about, funding the U.S. Postal Service, and we just had a lot of conversations about, wow, is there anything that we can do to help contribute to making sure that all the infrastructure is funded in the way that it needs to be, that they had the poll workers they needed, including being able to pay hazard pay to folks to be able to come in, that they had PPE for all their poll workers. So we donated $300 million to two groups to be able to partner with a bunch of local counties and state election officials to make sure that they have the resources that they need.
I've seen you mull over these things. I'm curious about what keeps you up at night. I was thinking about the Kenosha Guard. That was an armed militia that you have said, you admitted that it was an operational mistake that was using Facebook to organize. What went wrong there? Listen, the shooter in Kenosha was not a member of this group, but you did take it down after the incident where 3 people were shot and 2 died, by the 17-year-old teenager.
We've spent a long time looking into this deeply, and we've designated him as a mass murderer and have taken down all his accounts. Through our investigation, we didn't find that there was any kind of premeditation or anything in his accounts that would have suggested that we missed some signal in advance. Now, some people did report the group, and we made mistakes in not taking down the group when those reports came in. We did take it down. It did violate our policies, but we were slow on that. For militia groups like this, especially ahead of this election, we're going to need to be cracking down on this more aggressively in advance of that. to make sure that there aren't any of these groups that could get activated after the election and contribute to civil unrest.
And he announced, Mark Zuckerberg, just this morning that they're strengthening their enforcement against groups like that and QAnon. Especially concerned about what could happen after the election.
Yes.
He's very, very concerned about that. And I thought he made a really good point that just because we don't have the results, or that we may not have results election night, we don't know that, of course, that we may not have it, don't think it's not a legitimate election.
Well, that's going to be a pivotal role for us as well.
Yeah.
Anthony, he said that.
You know, in telling people,
that,
look,
yes.
we're used to getting the final result on election night, but under the circumstances this year, we may not.
Yeah, got to be patient.
Because COVID has changed the game. A lot of people now will not be going to the polls. So
Yes.
a lot of people will be using mail-in ballots.
I want to underscore how big a deal it is, and it's a great thing that Instagram and Facebook are giving people voting information, how to register, where to find your. That is a great nonpartisan way to help democracy itself.
Yes, and they've never done something that big before. And I also think that it's worth noting that they're giving $300 million of their own personal account.
That is
you could say, yeah, they're billionaires, they can afford it, but that's, but it's still $300 million, and that still is a lot
of
of money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.